Oh, very good, very good. Oh, and that's not going to even work anymore, so let me just see if that works. We're risking it. Two USB-Cs on a Mac at the same time. That's, okay, it looks like we're good. Yeah, so we're all ready to go. I'm Jesse Martin, and I'm going to be talking about skipping the queue, event-driven programming for everyone with Postgres. Any Postgres users? Very good. MySQL? So future Postgres users, awesome, great. We're gonna have yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. But basically, I thought I'm actually a fill-in speaker in this case, and that's because there was some unfortunate injuries for the previous speakers. But now you're stuck with me, and I thought, well, if it's gonna be kind of a pitch-in talk, why not just do a brand new one, right? Like brand new content. And I thought instead of also brand new content, let's also try to like hand illustrate the slides, because that's what you do when you're gonna do a new topic. Might as well try like everything new. So I would love your feedback, because the topic is kind of trying to gauge a balance between technical and product. So please, 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 I want your feedback. I want your feedback, really. The drawings, be kind. Like, I'm not an illustrator, so hopefully they get the ideas across. But yeah, I'm Jesse Martin, Developer Relations at Hasura. Fun fact, took me over a year to actually say the name Hasura correctly. My boss told me after 1 year, it's not Hasura, dude. So that's fun. There's a lot of videos with Hasura in it, so that's kind of fun too. My background is really, really wide. I have a background from agriculture, like actually packing products from fields, all the way up to APIs, and I have a fondness for IPAs. So anything in that range is definitely going to work. I'm a dad. I got 4 kids. That's not why I was up till 3:30 this morning, but it's kind of related. So I'm a little bit tired, but I love all things maker culture. I've got a huge collection of kettlebells. Any kettlebell users? Kettlebells? 1 kettlebell user. 2 kettlebell users. Fascinating. That's fascinating. If you have questions on kettlebells, let me know. I'm a hobby distiller. Ich bin ein Brenner, so yeah, that's kind of fun. Illegally, I'm a legal Brenner. I have a license, so. I'm a GraphQL advocate for the last 5 years, and Postgres fanboy, as you probably picked up. I'm going to turn on my timer here because this is a brand new talk. It's going to tell me when I'm talking too long because I have some live code to get into. So that being said, caution, here be opinions and weeds. This is really going to be more on a product side. So I've talked to a lot of customers. We've talked about the architecture patterns of going from procedural to event-driven. And so I really want to say this is not going to go into the academics of event-driven programming. I talked to a couple of people who were like, oh, you're going to talk on this topic? I was like, no, like that's getting really into the weeds. So if you have questions on that stuff, I can point you to the right people in the room. There's a lot of smart people on this topic. I'm going to talk more about specifically when you want to use the right tools for the right job, always, and kind of figuring out when do I need to use specific patterns. So we're going to do a really, really fast, high level, getting everybody kind of caught up on what event-driven programming is, because we do have some students as well, and frankly, I mean, the JavaScript community has more patterns than IKEA does, so we're wanting to figure out exactly how we want to make sure everybody understands the terms we're talking about. So we're going to dissect the title here, and we're going to start with looking at specifically what is event-driven programming, and then we'll get into what are queues. So these are our 2 main topics that we're going to want to actually talk about, and we'll have a lot of fun as we go along. So what is event-driven programming? Basically, it's the idea that if you trigger an event that occurs in one place, then that will actually trigger a behavior for something else that is happening in another system. So instead of having to worry a lot about the actual order of my architecture, I can talk about behaviors of my architecture, and I'll say this thing will respond in this way, given the specific input. And that allows me to not have to do any kind of polling or long-term kind of fetching for content, because that's a really inefficient way to build architecture these days. I'm going to give you an example of events versus polling here in a second, but event-driven architecture is just, frankly, a lot easier to reason about. I have a lot of discrete actors inside of a composition, and then these will be responding to the different behaviors. So for everybody who wasn't familiar, I think most people here probably know the term. Who actually knows the term event-driven programming? Should be most people. Oh, there are some hands that are down, so good. There's some people that at least enjoyed that slide. So event-driven versus polling. Everybody know pull to refresh? That's not polling, it's not like polling, but the idea is though, with polling, you're having this architecture where you're constantly trying to have a balance of like a real-time dial of, I'm gonna check my server every couple of milliseconds or seconds to see if there's new content. Like, is there new content? No. Is there new content? No. Is there new content? No. It's kind of this thing about doom scrolling, right? So doom polling, you're just looking at constantly over and over and over if there's new content that's gonna load. Usually you actually get a hit these days, but events are a different kind of paradigm where the system's just kind of sitting there and it's going to be able to say, hey, something happened, I'm going to go ahead and get my content updated. You can imagine that the event-driven approach is a lot more resource beneficial because I'm not actually having to fire off a whole lot of unneeded requests against my servers or having to actually worry about the cascade of polling that occurs when you're talking about polling architecture, because maybe I have a server somewhere that's polling 2 different databases, and then when that data comes through, I'm wanting my client to pull my gateway to see is there new data, and now you actually have this waterfall. It's kind of trying to figure out, well, do we do like odds on the server and evens on the client, or trying to figure out how to get the fresh content? So event-driven programming has allowed us to get out of the old waterfall approach of polling. But there are some challenges. Specifically, we have cold start issues. So this is actually when you're talking about event-driven programming, we're talking about a lot about serverless, like discrete little functions running in somebody's magical cloud, and they go to sleep on you all the time. Especially if you're a developer advocate and you use free tiers, they fall asleep all the time. And so a lot of times your first attempt will actually not go through because the server is actually waking up. Order of delivery is another problem. That was somebody else's joke. I think everybody who's talked on this topic makes this joke, but it is true. Like, order of delivery is really important, and it's something that is a problem to deal with when you're dealing with event-driven architecture. And then acknowledging receipt, right? So you want to actually talk about, do I know for sure that that event actually went through to the service that's handling this? Like, is that payment really going to go through? Like, that's a real question that you have to worry about with event-driven architecture. And so, frankly, enter queues. It's exactly what this software concept was designed to solve. And this is a really old problem. Some of the first queues software were designed back in the 60s. That's even before I was born. This is actually a real problem. And so queues help us with a lot of specific benefits around, do I need to have first in, first out? Do I need to have the ability to throttle so I'm not actually overrunning my server that's handling payments? Maybe it's not so robust, and so I need to say, okay, only every couple of seconds handle the next job. Do I want to batch these out? Some of the more modern queues have sampling and averages on what's currently in the queue, so you can actually get real-time analytics on top of the streams in flight. Really fancy stuff. So where are queues then helpful? It's when you've got a lot of massive amounts of data, right? So you've got a whole bunch of streams, you've got IoT systems happening where it's really important, okay, I need to actually track what data is coming in. Maybe you need really robust features. I talked about analytics and sampling on the queue itself, so I need to actually see what's currently in the queue to kind of know that I need to react to something that's not yet made it down the pipeline, but maybe there's something that's going to be a problem coming up. You also need queues when you live in Germany. German joke? Nobody? Okay. The jokes don't get a whole lot better than that, so if you didn't find that one funny, we're gonna have a little bit of a problem. But I live in Germany, so it's fair, right? I can make jokes about Germans, I guess. Anyways. Okay, queues are cool and queues are good, but your title says skip the queue, right? You just told us that you want a queue, and now you're saying, well, don't use the queue. Well, and it really boils down to, in a lot of cases, the queue is actually just overkill when it comes to event-driven programming. Here's kind of a contrived little example here, but cool, guy in the front is first, but it's not really a line. It's not really a queue. You've got 2 items in it, right? So there's not always a case where you actually need to have queues set up. And this is, okay, come on, dad jokes. Come on, I need a couple of laughs at this one. Bull is a queue software. Any JavaScript developers, Bull is like a JavaScript queue software. No Bull, queues can be a pain in the Kafka. That's nothing to sneeze at. Sneeze, you know. That's like, thank you. This is my whole budget for dad jokes is on this slide. My whole budget and didn't go anywhere. Okay, but all right, so why is it challenging? Well, a lot of times queues need specialist environments, right? They need to have some kind of special inputs. Yeah. I'm going back to the Germany joke slide just to get a chug out of that. You need specialist environments. You need to have a lot of hardware that's designed to handle this kind of high throughput. And frankly, you also need a lot of learning to learn these new paradigms and processes. Somebody who is a lot smarter than me, Pete Hunt. Everybody know Pete Hunt, React dude, yeah. Okay, yeah. Influential person around React. Anyways, he wrote a really cool article about Postgres, a better messaging queue than Kafka, with a question mark. So it's not. His argument is that basically that there are times to use a different tool than a queue for what you need. But he's talking about the cost that he has as an engineering manager. And I mean, these are real, right? Like the ecosystem is a totally different ecosystem with queue management software, so you have to learn all the new tooling. You've got to figure out how to get people internally to be aware of the service and to utilize it and utilize it to its fullness. And so there are a lot of both material and immaterial costs related to expanding your stack at any time. And in a lot of cases, the queue is simply just overkill, because the underlying problem is not all queues are the same, right? So if I go in Germany to buy a pretzel, queues, like order of events, very important. Like if I'm the first person in, I'm getting my pretzel first. But if like I'm sending out password reset emails, well, like if you get your email first before I get my email, it's not really a big deal, right? So there's a lot of systems where you have to ask yourself, do I need the things that the queue software proper is offering? So, I mean, like Postgres itself, a standard setup of Postgres can handle roughly 20,000 transactions per second. Now, those are batch transactions sometimes, so there might be like 4 or 5 transactions per actual discrete behavior in Postgres, but like, that's going to handle a lot of people's use cases for just trying to have queues behavior. Got to ask yourself, is the order actually important of what I'm trying to build? And like, is this stream of data, like, is this actually a stream of data, or is this more like an evolving record pattern? This was the example that I gave at the beginning, but like, this is what we would refer to as an evolving record, right? So from the user's perspective, this is an atomic transaction. I buy something. Now, me as an engineer, as the product owner, I'm going to make sure that I get your money, and I'll make sure that you get your product, but I'll make sure that all my retry logic is in place, and I'll handle that on my side. But like, from a user perspective of awareness, that's like one click, one transaction, and we're done. I bought it, and I expect to see this in about 2 weeks. And so this is what we're trying to figure out, is what kind of behavior is our clients expecting? What kind of behavior are maybe our internal consumers expecting? And those are where we ask ourselves the questions like, is this something that actually requires order? Is this something that requires analytics on in-flight data? And so there are a lot of cases where installing Kafka for sending password reset emails is probably not the right pattern. Okay, so what's something that's queue-like, well understood, supports events, exists in many tech stacks already, as we even saw here, and sits really close to the data? I forgot to mention a point previously, but a lot of our queue behaviors, or a lot of our event-driven behaviors, are actual data I/O anyways. So, like, no, queues don't do that, right? Queues are just waiting to perform the I/O. So if we're going to be doing data I/O already, what could fit the bill for this kind of a thing? And well, of course, it's Postgres. Postgres kind of actually fills a lot of these needs. So most people don't think that the Q in PostgreSQL stands for queues. It actually turns out most people are right about that one, but many people don't realize that it's also good for job-related queues, and it totally is. So let's have a look a little bit at using Postgres for event-driven apps with queue-like behaviors. So it's already transactional in nature, like we're doing data I/O. It supports events out of the box, and we'll cover that in the next slide here. And it actually has relational data. Like a lot of times what you want to see from the end of an event is like a bigger payload. I actually want to know, well, it's great that I got that order ID, but like, can I get his shipping address? And trying to figure out the rest of the data. I have a much bigger picture of data all around my ecosystem. How can I get all that data in place for what I need? So again, event-driven and queue-like. Well, let's go ahead and figure out how we can actually solve this problem with Postgres. So should we choose the hard way or the easy way? Hard way, right answer, because then I wouldn't be like a really lame ending if I switched to the hard way after. I'm going to show you the easy way at the end, right? So using Postgres native functionalities, there's roughly speaking two kinds of events that Postgres supports. We've got DDL events. These are going to be the data definition language type things. So this is going to be create tables, things of that nature, where you're defining schema. And then you have data manipulation language, things that occur on insert, update, delete. So this is data DML. And so you can depend on what it is you're actually doing, but in the cases of a lot of our event-driven behavior, we're kind of in DML space. And then Postgres has even cooler functionalities with things like foreign data wrappers. Anybody know about foreign data wrappers in Postgres? If you want a mind trip, like look up foreign data wrappers, because there's a lot of crazy, crazy things you can do, like loading CSV documents as a table with like a schema inside of Postgres from a remote source. Like, what? I love CSVs. It's like nobody else on the stage in this week is going to say they love CSVs. And extensions, so you can actually bring an extension. So a typical pattern might be is that we're going to go ahead and actually have something like our table here. I said go easy on the drawings. So we have the table here. We have a DML event, so an inserting of a row. And then that's going to lead us to have a trigger inside of a stored procedure where we're going to actually read the data that we have, use some kind of a logic. Okay, do we actually have something that's kind of like, do we have updated last or whatever kind of time tracking of our data? And then we'll process all of that inside of an event behavior using foreign data wrappers or whatever else. As you might guess, because I kind of skipped over that part, it's really, really like difficult to set up. Setting up foreign data wrappers, setting up store procedures, and setting up custom procedures requires a lot of specialist knowledge in SQL. There are really cool tricks in Postgres that allow you to do this, things like skip block when you're actually doing your reads so you're not blocking I/O. A lot of really cool tricks you can get into that space, but it actually gets to be pretty challenging to set up. So what we're wanting to do is actually figure out the other thing that Postgres offers, and that's Postgres cheat mode, which is what I work for. So we're gonna see what cheat mode is. This is where we're going to take Postgres and combine it with something like an engine. And so we're going to talk about what Hasura does here in a minute. But if you take Postgres and you layer on a couple of additional functionalities, what you get is the ability for when a DML event occurs over here. Actually, that was the wrong button. There's the right button. You have a DML transaction that occurs. Then what an engine might do is it'll say, we're going to listen to that, but we're going to go ahead and store that payload of what just occurred as a JSON payload inside of an event log on Postgres natively, like by the HTTP. And then when that occurs, we're going to go ahead and hit the wrong arrow again. We're going to store that as a JSON payload, and then we're going to have another tool that is actually checking for this event log. Yeah, actually it's polling, but we're doing it in one place, just one place. We're going to check that event log, and then we're going to actually run that through some rules up here that we might have defined inside of our engine. And then whenever we have a match here, we can actually go ahead and fire that off to either a SQL or a cloud provider, whatever we want to do. So this sounds cool, sounds like a good pattern, but like that's going to be difficult, right? No, it's not. It's not difficult because we're going to get to use Hasura for. And so I'm going to show you a demo here of kind of what I'm talking about, because it really is actually a pretty magical pattern. And when I'm saying that, it's actually open source. And everything that I'm talking about here is in the free product. So like, take the money and run. Like if you want to use it, pay me if you want, but everything we're going to talk about is totally in the open source product. And it's just a great way to build. Who here already knows about Hasura? Great. We're like the little sponsor on the logo. If you want to see, like, it's the little logo. But it's a really great way to build. So have a look at it. Before I do that, I want to give you a chance to snap this slide if you want. This is the article from Pete Hunt talking about the messaging queue, and this is actually from the site. One of the Citus contributors. It's a flavor of Postgres from Microsoft, talking about the same topic. Much smarter dude than I am, but he's using like native Postgres functionalities. If you really want to go in the weeds on it, it's a great talk to watch. So I'm going to switch over to my live demo. How am I doing on time? We're doing good on time. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and switch now to screen sharing, and we're going to kind of see how well we can set up some events. All right. So mirror. All right. Wow. That's a lot of icons. That was supposed to be hidden. That's embarrassing. That's good. All right. We're going to go ahead and have a look at Hasura here. I'm going to use the cloud version with a free tier. And that's specifically because it is a really easy way to get running. We also totally have like a Docker version, right? So you can just download it and host wherever you want, $5 droplet. Like, my boss cares which one you use, but I don't care which one you use. So feel free to use Docker. Cloud is actually just the easiest way to do it. So what we have here is we've set up the Hasura engine. So what's the Hasura engine actually doing? It is a tool that when I give it a data source, it will let me basically surface the functionalities of that data source in a GraphQL API and give me sort of like gateway-like behaviors on top. So I can give it Postgres, which has a schema, and it's going to say, I'm going to read that schema, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a GraphQL API on top of that, like automatically, like just like that, without without writing resolvers. And then it's going to say, well, and if you're doing events, like I can kind of pick up on those. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the ability to tell me what you want me to do with those events. In our case, we're going to run that against a web handler. So let's look at what our architecture, what we're trying to build is. I'm not sure if anybody's had to build this before. I built this so many times. We're going to try to take a really simple Postgres schema. This is my schema here. Northwind Postgres is kind of the really canonical example of you can find on every Postgres provider's like docs. But basically a whole bunch of docs. You got suppliers, you got regions, you got all kinds of tables and foreign keys and everything else. This is my database. And then we want to take that, and we're going to actually try to say every time we get a new customer, we're going to spit it out into a spreadsheet of some kind, because marketing doesn't know how to, I don't know, write SQL. So we got to get something for our head of sales, where every new customer goes into a spreadsheet, so he feels good on Monday morning when he wakes up. And to do that, I'm going to use PipeDream just as a simple test here for the case. Anybody know PipeDream? A couple people. PipeDream, everybody's sleeping on it, like really sleeping on it, because this is such a amazing tool for setting up quick data pipelines. Like literally, this is like a 5-minute task. If you just like say, give me a webhook, and then take the payload that comes in there and like add it to a spreadsheet, or make a tweet out of it, or post it to Slack. And I think an insane free tier as well. So really a powerful tool. You really should check it out. So what we're going to try and do, this is my microservice, right? And then we have my spreadsheet is my destination. I have my database. So let's go ahead and wire these all together here inside of Hasura. All I have at this point is just a Hasura project. I don't have anything connected, okay? Let's see how fast we can do this for event-driven programming live on stage. So we're going to see that I actually have 0 data here at the moment. Like no databases, no APIs. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to say connect the database here. I'm going to give it a quick name. And I'm going to use the Postgres driver. And I want to go ahead and just paste in my Postgres connection string, because that's what we do. We just pass around secrets on stage. We're friends here, right? So this looks like the right string. I think it's the right string. I think that's that one. We'll find out. No, that's not the right one because it doesn't have my password in it. If it has my password in it, you're going to know. So we're going to look for this string. There we go. So take a quick screenshot. I'm going to burn it down. So okay, we got. All right, here we go. So we have the database. We have a data source like definition here. We got the driver set up. I'm going to go ahead and say connect. Demo. This is live. This ain't videos. This is live. Okay, it's connected. So the engine's gone ahead and it's looked and it's found my schema. And it says, hey, you got like a whole bunch of tables here. You want me to track those? We're going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and say track all the tables. And when it does that, it's going to look for foreign keys, because again, we're talking about Postgres here. I mean, it's doing a lot of work right now. Just give it a second. And it's in California. It's early, so. Thank you for the one person that laughed at that joke. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and track these foreign keys. It says, hey, you got a lot of relationships here, and GraphQL is kind of like a relational thing. So we're going to go ahead and say, yes, track those foreign keys. And once the little red bar finishes across the magical slides here, we're going to actually have a finished GraphQL schema with read, writes, updates, deletes, and the ability to do streaming, subscriptions, and the whole 9 yards without writing any resolvers, like production-ready GraphQL API out of the box. So that's kind of crazy. Give it a second. There we go. we got it through. And yeah, API is done. So we can actually see now that we have our entire API, read, writes, updates, deletes, all that good stuff. And like we could ship this. Like there's a lot of permissions, there's a lot of cool stuff Hasura does. I'm not here to actually pitch Hasura that hard. So if you have questions, find me afterwards. I'm happy to show it to you. But yeah, so now we actually have a full-fledged API, and that's really cool. Let's go ahead and actually hook up events now to our Postgres database. We're going to tell it what we want to do is listen to the DML events on my default database here on the public schema. And I'm going to go ahead and say that very specifically on customers, whenever there's going to be an insert behavior, and you can do this all in metadata, like you can totally do this as an infrastructure as code approach, but I'm a developer relations person, which means I use GUIs. And I'm also going to enable this from the console here, which allows me to just trigger this webhook from inside of the console without having to do anything special. Good. I'm going to go ahead and snag my API hook here real quick. That's what I want. Head back over here inside of my event trigger, paste that in. And so now what I'm saying to the engine is whenever this DML event occurs, we want the metadata that's going to be passed into our engine to say, go ahead and execute this web handler with that payload that you stored inside of the event log. Everybody tracking, right? So DML goes to an event log with a JSON payload. My polling engine says, okay, we have new events. And then this one's supposed to go to this web handler. Going to go ahead and say create the event trigger. Give it a name. All right, we're going to call this the sales thing. Go ahead and hit create event trigger. I hope you're better at naming things than I am. Anybody else do passive-aggressive naming inside of production databases? No? Okay, good. Create a trigger failed because it cleared out my form. Somebody had bad state management here, I think. Oh, let's see here. Permission denied for table customers null. Oh, it worked a moment ago. That's fun. Let's have a look at it again here. We're going to go ahead and say customers. Let's just try it one more time, see what happens. I might just refresh the page. Maybe that's an issue. Fun. I do have a backup plan, so let's give it a second here. All right, here we go. Sales thing. Database, default, schema, public. And we're going to go for the customers table. And we're going to go for the inserts and the via console. And we're going to go ahead and give it that webhook again, which is still in my memory. I think, yep. And we're going to go ahead and say create that. Fun. Okay, so how are we doing on time? What? Take a drink, yeah. No time for a drink. We're going to go ahead and pull up the localhost version, which we have sitting right over here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open this up real quick. And I have another running instance, Docker Compose upd. That's what we wanted. I do have another running instance. So we're going to go and stop it. Anybody know this command? This one's really good if you got a lot of Docker stuff running. Kill everything. Write that command down. That'll save you some time. All right, so once that's finished killing off another example, good. Ooh, okay. We're going to go ahead and we're going to try that again. Good, we're running. We're up and running. I hope there was nothing important that was running on that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run over here. All right, go over to our data sources. We're going to go over again. In this case, I actually already have this one being tracked, so that's convenient. Let's go ahead and go to the event triggers. Actually, the metadata is still in place. So this is what it will look like when it works officially. This is like, it looks the same, right? This is the free version that we're using now, like totally the same. Like, again, take the money and run. We have this set up. And so now if we go to our data tab, we can head over to the event triggers. And I'm going to go to, data, over to my customers. And actually, I think I have a different event trigger there, so I need to overwrite it. So I'm going to go back over to the events. That would be anticlimactic. No, it is the right one. It's the right pipe dream. Actually, I'm not sure if it's the right one. Let me go and just change this real quick. I do a lot of pipe dream stuff. That is also metaphorically speaking. So we're going to go ahead and looks like it's all good. I'm going to go ahead and go to my data tab. I'm going to go to customers here, and I'm going to go ahead and trigger the behavior. I told you that we could do that from console, right? That's like this little button here. I'm going to go ahead and just trigger this behavior on this one here. We'll say invoke, and we're going to get it's running it against our webhook. Now it's probably gone to sleep on me, so Hasura is going to guarantee us one delivery. And so I'm just getting back a payload from the server because I didn't customize the response, but it's saying, hey, it worked. Let's go ahead and see if we get it in our sheets. And look at that. We've got an entry for our sales guy. So the moral of the story here is when you are DevRel, free tiers will bite you on stage. So that's one thing. I think it's actually a problem with my database provider that I chose. I'm infamous when it comes to free tiers. But this kind of architecture, so while, we did have to use a backup plan here, switching to the free tier, which is, I think, also cool because you can see exactly what you're getting for free. I think it's really amazing. Like, everybody should just really try it because it's really incredible. We set up an event trigger workflow and a GraphQL API on top of that in just a couple of minutes. And this is like a use case that most of you, if you haven't already had to do this, you will at some point have to write this for somebody in your company. And it's a really, really powerful way to build. I think that takes me on time, right? I got time. You guys want to see one more demo? You're going to have to flag me down then because my timer went out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop stop this one here now. I want to show you kind of some kind of the craziness that you can have when you, I'm like, is he typing on stage, right? I have a cool little demo here that's kind of fun. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to code now. And it's already built. I'm not going to live code per se on stage because I don't hate myself that much. But I will take a sip of water here. You know what to do. All right. So what I have here is I've got a actually running web server, and I'm going to go ahead and set up my server. So let's talk about what's actually happening in this specific product. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my web browser to show what this thing is. I'm going to do this in incognito, actually, because I think that's going to be better. Who here plays Wordle? Or has played Wordle? 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 Water? No, water, yeah. So Wordle, if you're not familiar, who here's played Codebreaker? Also sometimes called Mastermind. But we don't see that word these days. Okay. Yeah, so Codebreaker, it's kind of in this genre of course. We'll reboot the server. I wasn't paying attention in Kent's class. That's the problem. This is really fun. I ran through this about 5 times, like again, back to 3:30 in the morning, and it was flawless. We're going to head back over. This is a bit of an older demo, so we have a chance to refresh. And I'm going to do this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I think it's I have got bad state management. So I'm storing it in local storage, and it's being hydrated by Zustand. And yeah, I didn't probably do a proper check that it wasn't. I'm going to just reboot this here real quick with Chrome, and then we should be good to go with incognito browser. We'll find out. Because it's trying to hydrate something from server, and it's like doesn't work right because it's the server. Use remix, everybody. Like, okay, so what's happening here? This is like Code Breaker. This is a game where there's a code, you don't know it. There's a total of 5 possible positions, and you'll get feedback on did I do this from like it's the right spot, the right word, the right number or whatever in the right spots, or is it a right thing but in the wrong spot? So you got to kind of figure out what you have. So I would play, and this creates an account. So that right there just triggered on my API to create a new user for me. And then I can go ahead and try to guess. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to guess this pattern, that pattern, this one. I actually forget what I'd set it up as. So I'd hit guess, and then what's happening is I'm doing a subscription to the server, so a WebSocket connection to the server, because if I just sent people back like what the right answer was, then people would be like, oh, well, I can just look inside of the console, figure out what the answer is, and be a Wordle champion. So this is actually a server. What's happening is I make the guess. The guess is triggering a action, and that action is going to do an algorithmic check and say, okay, right spot, wrong word, or whatever else, and give me the whole payload, and send that back. So if we look at the actual code of what's occurring under the hood here, is we have this behavior here, right? So we have these actions, creating my user, and I'll show you where that is inside of Hasura. Then we have events, which is where I actually handle the guest. Don't ask me why I have a camel case and a squabble case in my code base, but I'm not a developer, right? I'm a product guy. So we have this ability here. What it's doing is it's sending the data back. So what we want to do is have a look at our running environment inside of Hasura. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Whatever, one of these profiles. Too many profiles. Localhost 8080. Default for the Hasura running environment. So we have the database, and we have a game. All right, the game is showing what the actual code length should be and the complexity. So what's the level of randomness we're going to generate, and then we can see that we have users that get created as soon as I hit play, and then we have the individual games for the users that are playing, and then we have the guesses. And we have their input guess, and then we have that normalized to an output of a right letter, right location, or right letter, wrong location with ones and zeros. And this architecture occurs then, so for my sign up, I have that added to my API, so that microservice I just plug in here as an action, and now I have that part of my API. But then the events is the interesting thing that we're talking about for event-driven programming here, and that is all I had to do was say create this handle guess, and then I give it this behavior here that says, okay, every time there's a new insert of a guess, fire off this handler, and then I can set my retry logic of how I want it to behave, and it'll go off and give me the logic and give me back that normalized payload, inserting it back with my API that I generated into Hasura. So then whatever I try to do and figure out my guesses, actually that was the right spot, I guess. If I try to change this to something else now, we'll see that it gets the updates, and I'm doing a live subscription to the server where I'm seeing the instant feedback from the events occurring inside of my server. So I'm triggering off a whole flow. I've got a very atomic behavior here. I'm making a guess, and then I'm evolving that record of this game. We're saying I'm going to go ahead and add the rightness or the wrongness of the guess. Order of input is not important here. I'm not hitting 20,000 transactions per second on this particular game, and for my specific use case, Q would not have been the right choice. But Postgres totally was able to handle it, and it's a really powerful way to build. Now I've got to be out of time. So, yeah, I will be around. Sorry that there was 2 goofs in the demo, but I hope you were able to see how powerful that is. Again, Hasura, there's a free version. There's also, we're totally enterprise ready as well. I mean, big banks and stuff. So if it's something that you want to look at for your company, my boss won't say no to that. But if you have any questions about Hasura, about building with Postgres, or just kind of architecture for queue-like behavior in Postgres, I will be around. So thanks, everybody.